Thank you so much for taking out time for this. We have on stage Shutapa Sikdar, writer, actor, Irfan's lifelong partner. We have Shailja Kejriwal, who's a writer and a producer, and one of the earliest collaborators of Irfan. We have Shubhra Gupta, the author, the ace critic, who's very good when she's reviewing somebody else's film. And I'm Danish Hussain. अब मैं अपने बारे में क्या कहूँ, मुझे मुश्ताक अहमद यूसुफ़ी का एक जुमला याद आ रहा है कि आपका इंट्रोडक्शन जब कोई और करता है तो उसका फ़ायदा ये है कि आप झूठ बोलने से बच जाते हैं, तो मैं झूठ नहीं बोल सकता इस वक्त. सो लेट्स बिगिन स्ट्रेट अवे, एंड आई हैव दिस क्वेश्चन टू शुभ्रा. When I started reading the book, and one of the things that I realized that Mimi, our friend, dear friend, who's the literary agent who proposed the idea of the book, she's here, there she is. When Mimi proposed the idea of the book to Shubhra, the tragedy had just happened. It was like a month since the tragedy had happened, and it was very raw for a lot of people. तो मेरा सवाल शुभ्रा से ये है कि क्या दुश्वारियाँ आपको आईं, क्या challenges आए, क्योंकि बहुत से लोग जो हैं they were still reeling under this tragedy. They were not prepared to talk. First, how you got the idea that the structure should be like this, and it should be a series of conversation with his collaborators. And then once you kind of decided that, फिर आपके क्या challenges थे? Because every time you would have thought of approaching someone, you could not have used the standard approach, because each person is so unique in this book. Each time you had to rethink what your questions will be, how will you approach them, what will be more amicable, and, you would wiggle your way inside. So let's hear about that. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you, Shutapa. Thank you, Shalja. Thank you, everybody, for coming. It's so lovely to be together and be talking about one of the few people who, in my professional life, didn't cause me to burst into tears every time I walked into a movie. It was literally for someone like me who does this as a Friday to Friday jobbery. And I have my colleague here, Nandini is here, who does the same thing. There are a couple of others, Alaka here. We all know how hard it is to get into a Friday with a new film, not knowing what we are going to be watching, and just keeping our fingers crossed that there will be some kind of surprise. And it was Irfan who managed to do this pretty much film after film. So I think it was a no-brainer when it came to the fact that it was Irfan who was a special actor. But having said that, when Mimi actually approached me for the book, I was reluctant. Maybe I'll dial back from reluctance. I was a little skeptical. I wasn't very sure about the book at all. मैंने सोचा कि एक किताब अभी थोड़े ही दिन पहले निकल के आई है. This is a colleague of mine and someone I've known well. Asim had done a book which was a traditional biography और अभी अभी तो थी, लेकिन अभी इसका महत्व क्या होगा? And then when Mimi said that it has to be from the perspective of a film critic, somebody who's looked at his journey right from the beginning to now, and maybe you can, of his milestones, of the fact that he was someone who was, with every film that he was doing, he was pushing the envelope. He was doing something, he was pushing the boundary between films that were supposed to be art house and films that were supposed to be popular, and every time he came up with something, he was moving closer and closer to the center of the stage from where I stood. So I think that really set me thinking. And in terms of the challenges, I can tell you this for sure, that when I started, I was very clear that I was not even going to get started if I didn't get Shutapa on board. I was very clear. I waited for, I reached out to Shutapa sometime in August of 2021, but I had my first proper conversation with her in about February or March of 20, when you had come back from Igatpuri, and then you said that you are now in a state of mind to be able to have half a sane conversation. So I said, fine. And I was very aware that this was an extremely sensitive moment. Obviously, someone who's lived a life with someone, and with being the kind of partner that Shutapa has been, I was both worried about how much I could go beyond that line, and how much I needed as a journalist to be able to ask those questions. And I started with Shutapa, who said, I'm happy to talk to you, but can we get Shailja on board as well? Not on board, but in the conversation. So you will find in the book, there's the only dual conversation that we have. They were all of them on Zoom. In fact, almost every interview I did in the book, it was all done on Zoom. Everybody was very kind. Everybody was sitting. It was the pandemic. Nobody was out shooting. So that was not a challenge. But the challenge was dealing with human beings and their grief and the whole idea of this absence that was something that was not just germane to the people who lived with him, but for people like us who actually watched him. And every film that he did, like I said, he added something to the way we see, to the way that a film start to open up on something that we haven't seen before, because he shifted some things, I think, in that sense. So when Shutapa said yes, and I started with them, and then I moved into my wish list. Most people I got, except for a couple of people. And out of the list here also, there were not too many. I mean, most people were quite okay about talking about Irfan, but there was Vishal Bhardwaj who kept me waiting for almost a year, and he said, when he finally did speak to me, he said, मेरे को बिल्कुल बात नहीं करना था, बिल्कुल बात नहीं करना था, बिल्कुल I'm still overcome. And there are parts of the conversation where I have the recording where he stops and says, hang on, Homi Adjania, who was so overcome. Nasiruddin Shah said कि वो अच्छा मैं बात करूँगा. Then he said, actually I've written about him, why don't you take it? I said, नहीं, मुझे लेना, आपने जो लिखा है वो नहीं चाहिए, मुझे आपसे बातचीत करनी है. So it took me a while to persuade some people said yes, but I'm grateful that everybody did give me their time and their thoughts and a lot of their mind space, because it was a conversation I was leading, not just about Irfan and his connection with the person I was talking to, but I was also talking about the film industry and how it started when he moved in and where it has, the kind of trajectory that it started to happen when he started to make his movies. So.
Thank you, Shubhra. Which brings me to a question to you, Shutapa, that did you know Shubhra beforehand, besides being a film critic?
No, I only knew her as a film critic.
As a film critic. Is it on? Is the mic on, please? Can you just check? It's on, okay.
Yeah.
So
I only knew her that she was the hardest to give beyond two stars for any film.
yeah. So when Shubhra approached you for this book, there was already Asim's book out, Anoop's book was on the way to come out. What was your first reaction to it, and when did you actually warm up to the idea of this book with Shubhra?
Okay, so when Shubhra called me, first of all, I was not really ready to speak. And beyond that, I told her, I also want to write a book on him. That's what I told her. But then she said, it's not from a personal perspective, but from a perspective of a film critic, and I want to see, it's like the gaze is like that. So then I said, okay. And then Shailja also called me. So many people called me, she's doing that book, about, then we'll give the interview kind of a thing. And I said, yes, I do. I know about it. But when I took a long time, of course, I was not getting, but when we finally spoke, it was like an adda. It was not an interview or anything of that sort. So we were on this thing, Zoom call.
Zoom, because Shutapa said, मेरे को नहीं आता ये सब करना, Shailja will fix it for me. I said, अच्छा ठीक है, अच्छा ये वाला नहीं हो रहा, अच्छा ये वाला दिन हो सकता, अच्छा ठीक है, आज नहीं 10 दिन के बाद करते. So it was like that. And we spoke over a period of, I think, almost 15 days.
Yeah.
Yeah, 15 to 20 days, yeah.
So
like you spoke successively?
Yes.
And then we said कि अच्छा ये 40 मिनट खत्म हो गया तो अभी फिर से करते हैं. And then we said अच्छा अभी खत्म नहीं हुआ है. And then you said you had to go out.
Yeah.
And then so it was an ongoing conversation for a while. So
yeah, we made it tough for her. But it was, so I like the idea of not fictionalizing something. I like the idea of not taking personal details. Actually, she was not interested in it. She was more interested in the process of acting and, you know, things like that, which was different from what I had thought in my mind about a book about him. So I was okay with it.
What was your idea about the book that you want to write?
I want to write a funny book about him because everybody knows him as this serious person. I want to write, you know, it's because he had neuroendocrine cancer, which kind of affected his gut, and you know, he was a very decent, soft, very delicate male. He was not a macho, masculine man, and he had this etiquette all the time. So, you know, when this happened, he had to fart a lot. And I thought that's the funniest thing to write about it in the journey of that entire treatment and everything, that how embarrassing it was for him. And how slowly that we accepted the disease accepted us, and how slowly it became part of our life.
So, I mean, this thing that you mentioned that Shubhra was not interested in the personal details,
Yes.
and she was only focusing on the professional
Right.
aspect. I mean, when you read the book, you get an impression that it is like an arena view of Irfan. It's like a stadium view where all the contributors or collaborators are sitting around and he's in the center. What we don't have, unfortunately, is Irfan's perspective as to what was he thinking of when he was looking at these collaborators or when he was working with them. And you being the closest person to him, you possibly may have some insight. So were there some unique things about certain projects that excited him? Did he discuss you that he has certain insights about how to do something? Or was he disappointed about certain things later? I mean, give us the inside story.
No, see, Irfan would have asked the first thing to Shubhra, why do you want to write about me? What's so special about me? You know, so I don't think he would, even if he was here, he would have really enjoyed the fact that somebody's writing about him. You know, so that's one thing. And secondly, you know, I personally feel that when you read the book, some interviews, even Anoop's book, if anybody has written, so you cannot actually separate him as a person and him as an actor. He did not believe that for him life was about a wholesome thing. What he believed in life was reflecting in his films, and not necessarily the same things, but he never changed himself from the core to become an actor. He didn't have an attitude. He didn't think that he has to arrive somewhere 10 minutes late, or, you know, he has to have 2-3 bodyguards. He was not like that person. He was the person inside the character he played in Madari. Inside, he was a middle class man. Inside, he was that Karib single guy. So inside, he was that what he performed. But easier said than done. I mean, I can say all that, but when it is I mean, everybody, like Shubhra said, he always pushed his envelope. The fact is that the envelope, when you come to Bombay industry, comes with a heavy weight. And it's not easy to push that envelope. That envelope is so heavy that most of the people can't push it due to various reasons. His bravery lies in that. His determination and his strength of character lies that he pushed the envelope.
This thing that you mentioned about him being very wholesome in his approach, and the personal and the professional really could not be separated. And this is also a theme which is recurring in most people who are writing in this book, where, whether it's Vishal talking or whether it's Tigmanshu talking, they're talking about that it was not about his character when he would read a script. It was not about what he's doing in the film, but his intention was always to have a wholesome view of what is this world, this universe I'm entering into. What is this? What is the intent of the film? And also in conversations, like also Sudhir Mishra mentions it, that he would be most of the time talking about other characters and what is happening around in that universe. So I want to understand from you that what was this holistic thing that he was? How would you tap upon that? Because you were the first person he would go to, and he would say, "Script padhiye isko." आई मीन इस पे मुझे एक थोड़ा असाइड याद आ रहा है कि फैज़ साहब को जब लोग कोई ट्रांसलेशन भेजते थे उनकी पोइट्री का, और फैज़ साहब को वो ट्रांसलेशन अच्छा नहीं लगता था, तो वो अपनी बीवी एलिस को दे देते थे कि तुम पढ़ो और तुम इस पे अपना वर्डिक्ट दो. सो व्हेनेवर एलिस वुड गेट द इंग्लिश ट्रांसलेशन ऑफ हिज पोइट्री, शी इमीडिएटली न्यू दैट Faz doesn't like this translation, and that's why this has been forwarded to me. Was it a similar equation, or was it like he actually went by your word on everything?
Your first question was the intention. So, intent of a person. See, it's a personal thing because he was not a practicing Muslim, but that's one word in Islam he caught very strongly was niyat. So the niyat was so strong in his personality, in his life, that what is my niyat in doing this? What is our niyat to tell this story about? You know, that niyat had to be transparent and honest. Okay, so that was foremost for him. So when you judge in a film script, and secondly, it has to be entertaining, it can't be preachy, people must get entertained, but at the same time, a niyat should be very clear. So these are the two things which kind of, we knew before reading any script that, okay, I said sometimes the script is very boring, or this is bad, or this is this thing, or he said this script is very bad. Like I remember, not bad, but he said, what is new about it? Why should I do it? He finally didn't do it because he was not well. Honey's film, which was Raat, I don't remember the name. Raat Akeli hai. So I loved the script. It was written by a female writer. And I thought it was amazing for a female writer to write a crime with so much of, I liked the script. So I kept on fingering him, what is it that you don't like? And he kept saying, we'll meet, we'll correct, if you like the core of it. He also liked the core of it. We'll work, but mujhe boring lag rahi abhi bhi kahin. He was very particular about the whole film. He never looked at his role. Of course he looked at his role, but it was very important for him that how the whole film was.
I don't know whether it's in your interview or in somebody else's interview where he says that if Shutapa okays it, then that means it's fine. So was it like you were the last word on his performance?
Performance, not in front of anybody, but at night, yes, I said I did not like the diction in Namesake. And he was like very, very affected because he said, what do you know? The Bengali old woman came to me in the auditorium and they hugged me and all that. Who are you? You're always criticizing me. So he was very unhappy with my shuru mein. I think it must be in my interview where I really felt touched in the first film, which I really felt touched was Pan Singh Tomar.
Yeah.
And that's when I told him, you have done good, and he started crying. Because he was holding it for so many years that kabhi to bole ki acha kaam kiya.
So it took you like 20 years to say that,
he's
that
good.
you're really good.
Yes.
You know, this also reminds me of one interview that I saw of Irfan, where he says that acting is like writing poetry. And when I saw that interview, I immediately understood it. मैं भी वो शायरी की ज़मीन में अपना हल चलाता हूँ, एक आध शेर मेरे भी 20 साल में निकल आए हैं. तो as an actor and as a poet, I instinctively understood that this is not a clever line. This is not a wisecrack. This is actually very profound, something that he's saying. And that's because शायर जो है, उसके पास दो चीज़ें हैं. तख़य्युल है, imagination है, और अल्फाज हैं, words हैं. Now the thing is this, that words, the vocabulary, is a given for everybody. Everybody has access to that vocabulary. ख्याल शायर का होता है जो जहाँ पे वो एक नई खिड़की खोलता है दीवार के अंदर. The craft of the poet is to take that khayal and then weave it with words, do a selection and curation of words, that when that thought in those words is written, it lands on the meter. And when it lands on the meter, your attention is not drawn to the craft or to the meter. Your attention is drawn to the thought. And that's what it hits you in the gut. Like जैसे फैज़ साहब कहते हैं कि गमे जहाँ हो, रुख़ यार हो या दस्ते अदू, ज़माने का गम हो या महबूब के गाल हो या दुश्मन के हाथ हो, गमे जहाँ हो, रुख़ यार हो या दस्ते अदू, सुलूक जिससे किया हमने आशिकाना किया. So now when you hear the शेर, you're not thinking about, oh, this is landing on meter. It's a thought that hits you. And then suddenly I saw the parallel that this is what an actor has to do. You have your physicality, which is given to everybody. You have the same set of 8, 10 emotions that you have to play with. Now, as an actor, how do you curate that little twitch in the eye, that little look towards the light, that little selection of emotions, and then so poetically put it across that the performance does not draw your attention towards the craft of the actor, but it mirrors the emotions of the moment and hits the audience in the gut. And that is something which Irfan used to do consistently. So my question to you and to Shailaja also, because she's been sitting very quietly and kind of ducking everything, is that you were one of the earliest collaborators. And I remember you saying in your interview कि हमारा सलमान शाहरुख तो इरफान ही है, तो हम जो कुछ करेंगे इरफान के साथ ही करेंगे. And you kind of saw it is that period of his life when he was not really well known as an actor, but you guys believed in him, you saw that talent. How did you see this poetry in motion? This thing of Irfan intuitively translating or processing emotions, scenes, scripts, and then putting forward this thing in front of you on screen.
देखिए ये तो आप लोग बहुत सीखी पड़ी बातें कर रहे हैं. आई लुक्ड एट हिम लाइक अ फैन गर्ल बेसिकली एंड I had seen his films earlier, but when I was at Star and we were doing Star bestsellers, तो उस वक्त बहुत सारे directors थे and you know they would all come and we were all kind of starting out together. And I remember Tigmanshu had come first, and wo with Sunil. Sunil was producing that film, which was called Ek Sham Ki Mulaqat. It's a wonderful film, by the way. And they came with the story, and then they came with the casting. And मुझे तो लगा अच्छा इरफान खान करेंगे, you know, मतलब whatever, because he was acting in films and this that. तो मुझे नहीं लगा था कि he will, you know, sort of do this. But then, you know, between Sunil and Tigmanshu, they got him. एंड ये जो आपने अभी सारी बातें कही ये पोइट्री वाली इतनी समझ मुझ में नहीं है. मुझे सिर्फ देख के ये लगा कि वाओ बहुत अच्छा लगा, यू नो. एंड उसके बाद सम अदर डायरेक्टर्स केम, यू नो, गौरव, देयर वाज अ डायरेक्टर कॉल्ड गौरव, ही केम विद अनदर स्क्रिप्ट एंड उसमें भी इरफान थे और किसी, यू नो, समबडी एल्स के उसमें भी इरफान थे. एंड सडनली इट जस्ट बिकेम कि, यू नो, ये सीरीज ऑफ शॉर्ट फिल्म्स आर बेसिकली Irfan's films. I mean, people started asking me at Star कि, you know, कोई और एक्टर है या कुछ, you know, तुम्हें कुछ मतलब. But the ease with which he played all the characters, because each of the films were different. In one he played, I think there was Indraneel Goswami's film where he actually plays a version of Mrinal Sen, and that was amazing. So that is something that he did. Then he played Fursat Mein with Jeetu Bhai. He played a very, very old man at the time. So that was interesting. So इतने आसानी से और इतने अनायास वो हर कैरेक्टर में घुस जाते थे, तो वो देख के भी, I mean, we would just feel blessed कि, you know, wow, I mean, it's great. तो हम इतना नहीं समझते थे कि, you know, क्या कर रहे हैं. बस देख के as an audience we would be like really happy that he was, you know, there and he was doing stuff with us, and we were just grateful for that actually.
I mean, you began as a collaborator and then you became a dear friend.
Right.
Tell us about that journey as to you, Shutupa, all of you kind of coming together and being these friends.
तो बेसिकली
She was my friend.
हाँ, एग्जैक्टली. मैंने बहुत समझदारी की, यू नो, जो अक्सर लोग नहीं करते हैं. मैंने बीवी से दोस्ती की. तो मैंने नो, बट एक्चुअली आई वॉज अ ग्रेट एडमायर ऑफ शुतुपा's राइटिंग, बिकॉज शी यूज्ड टू राइट बनेगी अपनी बात. एंड शुतुपा आती थी चैनल में मीटिंग्स के लिए, तो बड़ा मज़ा आता था. मतलब शुतुपा की हंसी उससे पहले, you know, cabin में आ जाती थी. तो we used to know, everybody used to know कि Shutapa had arrived and so on. And at the time, like, you know, I was fresh from Calcutta, from the university. तो मुझे लगता था कि बड़ी मज़ेदार बातें हुआ करती थी हमारी. You know, we used to have like a good conversation and all. And then, you know, it was always कि हाय शायद एक दिन इरफान भी आ जाए. And एक दिन ऐसा आया कि इरफान भी आया. And, you know, like, I was like, oh my God. And everybody in my office was like, oh God, like, you know, सब cabin के बाहर छुप छुप के देखने की कोशिश कर रहे थे. I was feeling very important. तो वो सारी चीज़ें होती थी. एंड बट देन Shutapa and I did a lot of work together also in terms of Shutapa's writing was really, she did a very interesting bestseller episode which was called हम साथ साथ हैं क्या, and that was the year where हम साथ साथ had released. So So that was quite a take on that, Hum Saath Saath Hain Kya. And बिल्कुल that take was very interesting. I mean, you know, after Hum Saath Saath Hain. तो बस ऐसे ही हम एक साथ काम करते थे. And I think Irfan would see us from a distance at that time and say कि पता नहीं क्या कर रहे हो टीवी में, you know, like थोड़ा it used to be a bit of a distant kind of a thing. But the good part was that he felt that we probably had the potential of doing something otherwise as well. So I think it just grew in that manner, basically. You know, like everything with him was really simple. It wasn't like one moment or, you know, it just sort of flew.
No, but there is one moment you mention in the book. We want to hear about it. The first time when you spotted Shutupa and Irfan together. I think that's a classic moment which all of us should hear it right now.
Well, actually, I had gone, this was I think 91 or 92, I'm not sure which year, but I had gone to the Film Institute to do an FA course. And तब तक दृष्टि रिलीज हो चुकी थी.
FA, for those who don't know, film appreciation course.
Film appreciation course था. And so, you know, I mean, हम वैसे ही थोड़े लुक्के टाइप के होते थे. And so we were doing all of that, and then, you know, suddenly there was this murmur, you know, in this whole place कि Irfan is come, Irfan is come, Irfan is come, Irfan is come. And I think दृष्टि रिलीज हुई थी. तो मेरा एक बंगाली फ्रेंड था, उसने आके मुझे ऐसे बंगाली में बोला, देखी चीज भीषण हॉट. So so I said, हाँ देखी ची, you know, etc. Says he's here. So I said, यहाँ क्या करने आया? तो फिर हम ना, मतलब we started trying to follow him, and then we saw, मतलब I can never forget that image. It was, you know, two people walking. One lanky man looked a lot like what Babil does now. And then there was this hottie by his side wearing shorts and a singlet, you know, wearing shorts and a singlet with frizzy hair. And I'm like, forget him, ye kaun hai? And then, you know, I mean, we were all heartbroken ki, अरे मतलब, whatever. तो फिर तब से फिर friend zoning कर दिया तब से.
And that reminds me of one more very interesting anecdote that we will come to. But before that, I wish to welcome Suni Tarapurwala, who's here, who's joined us. And this whole poetry thing that I just talked about, actually Suni also mentions it in her interview, where she says that his acting was like poetry. So all that I said, I had already thought of it when I first saw the interview. And then when I'm reading the book and I'm looking at what Suni is saying, I'm like, damn, Suni has already kind of figured it out. Now she would think that I'm plagiarizing her words on the stage. Thank you, Suni, for joining us. But coming back to this, so there's again one very funny anecdote which Shutupa mentions, that when they joined NSD, and they've just joined NSD, Irfan and Shutupa, and Shutupa somehow was, you know, in arms with the third year students, and she goes and she rags Irfan, and Irfan believes that she's my senior. And only later he's startled to find that she's sitting in the same class as him. So let's hear a little bit about that.
Okay. So what happened was that I am born and brought up in Delhi. So NSD is in Delhi, is situated in Delhi. So I didn't have that whole thing of going to an institute. He came from Jaipur with a very conventional house. So he was really like, you know, and he was, for him it was like a Tirthasthan. For me it was just an alternative place, you know. So he had in his mind that he's going to his pilgrimage now, from here he'll go to whatever, you know. So he had this seriousness, and I knew this, that he was like a sincere kind of a boy. So I ragged him. So he asked me something, Suniye and Aap and all that, and I was, you know, like, okay, you know, whatever. So then I kind of ragged him. He asked me how to go to the library, I think, or something he asked me. And it's like an ancient story, you know, whatever. So I remembered, and I misguided him. शायद मैंने कहीं और बोल दिया, you know. उसके बाद जब वो लौटा, उसके बाद मैंने बोला, तुम्हें क्यों लगता है तुम्हें हो जाएगा? क्यों हो जाएगा तुम्हारा यहाँ पर? You know, तुम्हारे जैसे तो कितने हैं, you know, it's a all India this thing. He said, हमने भी नाटक किए. मैंने कहा कितने किए हैं? You know, so ऐसे ऐसे करके बात हुई. फिर मेरे का टाइम में मैंने कहा चलो ठीक है. वो बोला आपको लगता है मेरा नहीं होगा? मैंने कहा नहीं, मैं ऐसा नहीं बोल रही. And then he saw me giving the second exam. So we had 2. So once you finish and get, you know, so we all got through hopefully for the first exam. So second again after a few days. These are now I don't know what the procedure is. So, you know, so we were writing, and he suddenly turned and he saw me writing the exam, you know. So he was very angry. See, for him, this is like little this thing. At that time, which I realized in our entire journey, for him, honesty was very important. So for me, it was just a frivolous thing, you know, like it was just taking panga. But for him, वो पंगा की कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है पर तुम डिसऑनेस्ट हुई कि तुमने थर्ड ईयर की नहीं हो तुमने मुझे मैंने कहा मैंने तो बोला ही नहीं या आई एम नॉट फ्रॉम थर्ड ईयर यू ओनली बिलीव्ड आई वाज इन थर्ड ईयर व्हाट टू डू you know so it was like that but in his life there are three mantras you know he had no morality in terms of he never judged people he never passed any judgment over anybody you know all through his life he's done like you all know how many films he did I think too many for his age. So he's done too many films, so many projects, working with so many directors, but I don't remember even once coming back home and he bitched about those people. Anybody, any co-actor, anything, he would say, I don't like this, I don't like it. But you know how it is, like when you come back home from a shoot, you start saying things. Never ever has he done that. So which I felt was something I had to learn from, that you know, you can't sulk. And you can't have that victim card always ready. So that was it.
There's one more thing. You know, my first meeting with my first meeting with Irfan, it was like a social dinner, and he was exploring at that time how to adapt Shamsur Rahman Farooqi's novel Kai Chand Te Sare Asman into a series. And the only thing, I mean, it was a longish dinner which went on for 2-3 hours. But the only thing that I took away from that dinner and which hit me that evening was that at some point the conversation became about hunting for sport. And he just went into this whole thing about how it was very disgusting and how he hated animals being killed. And you know, he spoke about his family and how it was a big thing there to kind of do hunting, and he detested that, and he has grown to even detest that more. And when he began talking about it, I had no idea where this conversation is going on, because it seemed like he's talking about his family and how hunting is a tradition. And then suddenly the conversation started turning, and his disgust for hunting, for sport started coming out. And then I suddenly realized that this is not a man who's talking from a moral high ground. This is a man who's talking from the pain of a fellow living being, which is a very evolved thing. And then when I read the book, I find Tigmanshu's chapter where Tigmanshu is talking about they are shooting in a Haveli and there were beehives there. And Tigmanshu, the first schedule they had, they got stung badly because the cook apparently happened to put the pot under the beehive. So Tigmanshu wanted to be safe, and he said, you know, just remove all the beehives. And when Irfan walks onto the set, he finds all these dead bees around. He was heartbroken, and he confronted Tigmanshu as to why you did that. So that is one aspect which I think is a very evolved aspect, and I think it would be lovely if you could talk about that, because you two must have seen it at close quarters.
Yeah, because, you know, it like you rightly said about the fellow living being. So, you know, when he was not well, first of all, before that only, he had this thing with the mullahs and everybody for when he spoke for, you know, this animal slaughter which happens in Eid, so which took an ugly turn, threats to him, etc. See, the point is, he again was not standing on a moral high place. He was saying, why are we killing? Why was it in Islam? The Islam, it is like you sacrifice. But where has that jazba of sacrifice? You are just by killing another animal, another life, you are calling that a sacrifice. So somebody, naturally as usual, what happens is somebody misunderstood, misquoted, it became huge, etc. But when it came to even the disease, and I will admit that I became very superstitious. And some people said that, you know, you should do this, koi bali karwa dijiye. And I still remember when he knew that it is an advanced stage of cancer and the doctor has given that much of time, quote unquote, and even then he said, on my not at all, killing somebody, I will not have that life for myself. So even at that vulnerable moment, he never gave up on his thought, what he was so important for him.
Okay, I think
I just wanted to
Yeah,
actually
yeah,
say something when you talked about personal and professional, and that I would not ask anything personal and it would only be professional. What I meant was that I was not interested in gossip. I was not interested in any salacious stuff that was always floats around actors and people who work in different situations with different co-actors. I wasn't really interested in going down that path. I was interested in looking at him as someone who gave us immense pleasure as an actor, as a performer, and also I think as a human being, I think he distilled a lot of his own self into his performances. And what that meant to me that he had, I've seen practically everything he's done, right from, I mean, most of his television and his films. And I saw there was a distinct departure from being a very actorly NSD type, under the light, यहाँ खड़े होके बोलना, to someone who became so fluid that we didn't know whether he would enter left or exit right. That to me was the most fascinating thing about this actor and the performer. And I wanted to decode, if that is the word I can use, about what it actually took for him to do all of those things and live that life over the so many years through the lens of all the people who had worked closely with him, with his family, with his friends. And in this profession, you all are part of it. You know that there are no friends. Literally, all friends are people who are friends are on set, and then after that, you don't meet for a long time. But he managed to create some friendships which he nurtured for so long. And again, that to me was interesting in how he made a difference between the people that he worked with and the people that he wanted to spend time with. And I think he made those distinctions really.
नहीं ऐसा नहीं है. I mean, E. Nivas and Suni Tarapur are sitting here. I think they are my friends. They haven't, dropped me after my shooting with them. But you're right. I mean, the economics of it, the transactional nature of it is such that people kind of go their own way.
And I
then-
was also very interested in the people who worked with him in this so-called mainstream industry as as people who looked at him as this guy who would pull people in. अच्छा इसको ना थोड़ा सा serious type लोगों के लिए इसको ले लेते हैं. I mean, I heard over and over again people talking about this, that let's get him. Said he played cop roles. He played, either the bad guy or he played cops. He only started to become a human being, I think, after Anurag, Anurag Basu did Life in a Metro. And Anurag Kashyap said something to me that was very interesting. He said he was still playing funny roles. He was still playing roles where he was doing the lover, but he was being funny. So I think that it really shifted when he did Piku, or when he did, even I think Piku was that moment when people realized, oh my God, look at this guy. He's standing in the same frame with Deepika and with Amitabh, and where does the eye go? Goes to Irfan.
Actually, there's one more funny thing which is there in the book, that some filmmakers towards the end of his life wanted to cast him so that their films could be seen internationally. Because if Irfan is in the film, possibly there will be an international audience which will watch the film, which I thought was really, really funny. But thank you for this thing, because it brings me to my last question. And, even as an outsider, I came to acting very late. By the time I came to acting, Warrior was already happening. But even as an outsider, I could notice the graph. I could see Irfan's growth. And I could see that towards the end of his, like by the time Namesake comes and Piku comes, his range had become very wide. He could play characters very different from the background that he came from. And it's not easy to do, to break the conditioning that you've had from childhood to your adult, and then suddenly to step into a league which is not yours and play it with the same comfort, like the Netflix limited series, Tokyo Trials, where he plays this Bengali lawyer in World War II. Superb. I mean, such finesse that it's like a masterclass watching him. Now, my question is both to Shubhra and to the two of you, is that you being a film critic, you also must have noticed this graph, with these milestones happening in his life, with Salam Bombay, then Bestsellers, then Warrior, then Hasil, then Maqbool, then Namesake. then you have Piku and Hollywood films, and finally Hindi medium coming, and you're observing him as an actor on the outside, while you two are observing him as an actor from the inside. How was this process of growth, where suddenly his horizons are expanding, his repertoire is expanding, and he's able to bring in a lot of these characters which are unlike him, but with such finesse and comfort that it seems most natural that only Irfan could have pulled it off. So, like an outside view and an inside view.
I think you should go first because really mine, I've already pretty much said what I had to. But okay, I can add something that I think what Irfan was doing in this, and I don't think he was even aware that he was doing it, because when you are doing a role, you are not really aware of anything that this role will have as an impact once the movie is out. You are just, as an actor, you are an actor for hire. You are just making that movie. You have no idea what that movie's trajectory is going to be like, how, whether it will have legs, whether it will, whether its impact will be beyond its, say, natural run in a theatrical release. Well, I think what Irfan was, when he came in, I think in 2001, when he got Warrior, by that time, I think everybody, including Shutapa, said he was so unhappy about about the way his life was going, that he was going to give up on acting. He was just going to go into some other zone of entertainment perhaps, but definitely turn his back on acting. I think that way Asif Kapadia's Warrior gave him the confidence that he could literally be seen. And I think those frames of people who've seen the movie, it's that he is beautiful in that very arid frame upon frame. What you see is this man, and your eyes really do not move away from. And he really wasn't a warrior in the way that we've seen warriors before, but he had something about the way he carried himself, that carriage in the eyes, and the way his own journey in that film is quite tremendous. I think initially he was looking for outsiders like him to partner with. And I think all of Hasil, Maqbool, all Anurag Basu's film, Vishal Bharadwaj, they were all, at that time, they were all new. They were not the stars that they became later. I think these guys, their confluence was both a coincidence as well as something that they all had been working toward. And that little thing, the gates widened for them, and they just walked in and they started to change the way Hindi movies were being made. I think that was very important, and when producers of legacy studios started to look at how Irfan was getting the kind of response film after film after film, in even the roles that he was getting, they were not fringe, but they were not central roles either. I think they started to say the advantage of taking an Irfan in their movie, which was completely like a pot boiler, like a Sanjay Gupta would take, have a Salman Khan kind of a character being played by Irfan Khan. And the film itself was what it was. But I think he really had so much fun doing that film, where he's wearing a black jacket and saying the kind of dialogue that Salman Khan would have said. Like, oh, बाहों में something he says in the end. Aishwarya Rai के साथ he's saying, अगर जिद होती तो, I don't know. I mean, I can't even say it like that. But the way he was doing that role, he was aware. I think he was self-aware enough. He was kind of laughing at himself a little bit, but having so much fun, like having a total blast. I think that journey of somebody like him coming from a National School of Drama, coming a trained actor from drama school, making that kind of inroads into mainstream Hindi cinema and changing it subtly every time he did a role. And that movie became bigger and bigger. And then Hindi medium, of course, it went into the whatever it's called, the 100 crores. And then suddenly, I think Karan Johar tells me in the book, he says, if you ask me, that was the time when everybody sat up and said, Arey yaar, this man can make money and he can get the roles in, so why don't we start? I think it took him up to that from my perspective. And then, of course, Hindi medium wasn't, I think his other films that may not have made the 100 crores were to me more interesting to watch as a critic and as a viewer. But, you can't fight the power of crores in this industry. So
yeah. But I'll begin with what Shubhra is saying about the warrior. See, why he wanted to quit acting at that time is because he couldn't be still. nobody let you be still in a frame because they'll say कि अरे बहुत late हो रहा है यार कुछ दिखाओ action दिखाओ emotion दिखाओ. See, Asif could believe in his style and he could indulge in something which he was not being able to sit still and yet show the emotion, which is a very different definition in Indian mainstream bolo, चाहे alternate bolo, तब तक ऐसी performances नहीं होती थी. I think why, like your question was that how could he, that journey. There was no journey as such, but the point is that Irfan always believed in himself. He really believed in himself. You might think he was worth 100 crore or no 100 crore, but he had a strong belief about himself. And he knew कि मेरा जो है ना path correct है, money will follow. I will not change my path. I will not run around a bush and dance. I will change the definition of a romantic hero, definition of every kind of role. And he was very, like, we spoke about it. And we always tell him, like, from a commercial point of view, कि ये picture कर लो यार. बोला नहीं इसमें क्या है? कुछ नहीं है. It's anybody can do it. Why do they need me for that? So he would pick up, even when he didn't have too many options, roles, even in a film like Gunde. You can't ignore him. Even with, Akshay Kumar being there and Priyanka being there, but when he comes on the screen, you have to just look at him. So that is what was his strength. He had a tremendous self-belief on himself and he would not do work he was not comfortable with. So that is I think there was no kind of a journey which happened. It was a constant journey of evolving. And of course, like for an actor, like my son is just beginning and he always feels, what's that scale? He keeps asking me, Baba ka. See, we never discussed कि ऐसा करूँगा और वैसा करूँगा, He always read his scripts 100 times. That I am very sure of. And but I have never seen like a process कि वो mirror के सामने ऐसे बात कर रहे हैं, वैसे बात कर रहे हैं. So which I can tell him. I can't guide him on that. It's something internal which happened to him, and in his own way, it will happen to him. But again, like Babil has an intent. I want to do good. I think that intent is very important. Again, coming back to your word intent, Irfan had a strong intent of doing good work.
Shailja?
I have another point of view actually. When I was reading Shubhra's book, I realized that everybody who's contributed, to that book, they all love Irfan a lot, right? जब आप किसी से मोहब्बत करते हैं, तो आपको लगता है वो आदमी कुछ भी कर सकता है. तो सारे जो डायरेक्टर्स, राइटर्स, मैं खुद, मतलब इरफान यूज्ड टू बी हॉरिफाइड, ये लव स्टोरी मत करवाओ यार, मैं नहीं लव स्टोरी कर सकता. पर मुझे अगर लगता था कि क्योंकि मैं मोहब्बत करती थी, तो मुझे अगर लगता था कि नहीं आप बिल्कुल क्यों नहीं, मतलब मैं मोहब्बत करती हूँ तो कोई भी लड़की कर सकती है मोहब्बत, इसमें क्या बात है, तो मुझे लगता है कि एवरीबडी हु रोट रोल्स फॉर हिम, दे सॉ इरफान, क्योंकि वो उनसे मोहब्बत करते थे और उनको लगता था कि वो ये कर सकेंगे. And that's why he got such varied roles, whether विशाल के लिए मकबूल उन्होंने किया या मीरा के लिए कुछ किया या तिग्मांशु के लिए कुछ किया, तनुजा के लिए कुछ किया. I think everybody, and the love is very apparent in the book, so I think it's also the love of everybody in the book that made Irfan what he was.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Shutapa. Thank you, Shubhra. Thank you, Shailja. Thank you so much for all of you patiently listening to this conversation. Now I will invite Babil on stage so that he can read an excerpt from... Come here. So that he can read an excerpt from the book. And after that, आप हैं, कोरम है, मैकमिलन है, हमारी जिम्मेदारी ख़त्म. आप जो चाहें वहाँ कर सकते हैं. Thank you so much. Thank you.
So, Anup Singh was asked, did you know him well when you reached out to him for Kissa? And he said, I didn't know him well at all. We had done one thing for television together. This was for Star TV, one of their bestsellers episode. And his name had been suggested by Meeta Vashisht, his classmate from NSD. I remember I was setting up a shot for this bestseller. It was a very small crew. The actors were around, and I was in front with the cameraman, looking through the lens. And I was sort of choreographing the action. Many a times while doing so, I tend to hum something, just to comprehend the rhythm of the material. So I was humming something, unaware, and then suddenly behind me, I heard someone singing what I was humming. A lyric from Qawwali sung by Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan. It was Irfan. He had been listening. And from that moment, I think we really sort of bonded. Not only in terms of Nusrat Saab, who was very, very important to our work, but also this whole idea of rhythm that we both in our own ways seem to have found important for us in our work. These things for television you do very quickly, so we didn't have much time to interact. This was our one moment of interaction, us singing together. And when we did the shot, we enjoyed it immensely because suddenly the rhythm was there. I could see Irfan bring a quality that actors nowadays just don't have. So I had him in my mind, and I had a very affectionate sort of feeling for him from then on. When I finally decided that I would like to cast Irfan in Kissa, I called him and he said, "I've been waiting all these years for you to call me." There must have been a gap of 10 years between the bestseller and Kissa. And we had never met or spoken in between, but we carried each other in our spirit. I read him the script and I could see he was quite taken by it. He said, "Anup Saab, ye to mujhe haunt karti rahegi yaar." I still remember those words. "Ye to mujhe haunt karti rahegi, lekin main nahi karunga ye film." It is going to keep haunting me, but I will not do this film. I was completely taken aback. I said, "Nahi?" He said, "Itni dark film hai yaar. Just think of it from my point of view. I have to live with this for at least next 6 months. How am I going to live with this kind of darkness? I can't do it. I'm sorry." आप कुछ romantic लिखिए ना मेरे लिए, जैसे वो bestseller की थी हमने. Why don't you write something romantic for me like that bestseller we had done together? I was superbly disappointed and left. This is when he was still living in Mud Island. I took a rickshaw to the ferry. It was late in the evening. Really, I didn't know who else to cast. I didn't know whether it would be possible to make this film. As the rickshaw drove towards the ferry, I suddenly calmed down and I thought about it. I realized that Irfan had actually got the film completely wrong. And perhaps the fault was mine. Maybe I wasn't able to narrate what was at the core of the film. So I rang him. I said, "Irfan Saab." I still called him Saab at the time. Later I started calling him Janab. That worked very well between us. It carries for me all the respect I have for him. He always called me Anup Saab. He never called me Anup, and I called him Janab. That little distance it created, a little formality, was very important because what we were doing was very fragile and intimate. That formality was important to balance the intimacy that we were trying to work out in our film. So I said, "Irfan Saab, I think I haven't been able to say what I really wanted to say. Can you give me 10 to 15 minutes? Let me just come back." He said, "Haan, aa jaiye." I'd left the script of Kissa with him and he was in the room upstairs. Mamma, I'm not going to call you Shataba. Mamma, his wife. Okay. Shatapa, his wife, brought me in. She was a little sorry because I think she really wanted Irfan to do the film and she liked the script very much. Irfan came down the stairs with the script and pushed it across the table to me, which I understood to be, "आप अपनी script ले जाइए, मैं पढ़ने नहीं वाला हूँ इसको. Take your script with you, I'm never going to read it." I said, "I remember that you like the music of Nusrat Saab very much." He said, "Yes, of course." I said, "You know when Nusrat Saab sings, his whole face distorts. And sometimes that face can look really violent and monstrous. But the voice that comes out is the most beautiful voice that we have ever heard. That, to me, is the film." He thought about it for a moment and then he said, "अच्छा चलिए ऊपर चलते हैं. थोड़ा नुसरत सुनते हैं. Let us go upstairs and listen to Nusrat. I have some things of his that you might have never heard." He took me upstairs and set up the music. Then he turned to me and said, "करता हूँ ना मैं film? मैं करता हूँ, चलो." "Yes, I'll do it." And that is how he agreed to do the film. Then that whole evening we sat late into the night just listening to Nusrat. This is such a lovely kissa about kissa.